So anyway, obviously, as we know, there has been a massive amount of interest in this story that's coming out of Texas in regards to the walkout by the Texas Dems who are trying to protect voting rights. And we all know that there's a lot of teeth to these bills, but Representative Crockett obviously is she's an exceptional lady who has done an amazing job of leading
Badass.
Badass, as Jen would like
Badass.
to say. But could definitely speak more to, because again, I don't really care what corporate media says because everything they say is distorted. I need to hear it from the actual representative who can tell you exactly what is in this bill that is going to hurt voters immensely, and it's going to hurt them if it passes.
Yeah, which again, it's all sorts of restrictions. It's nothing. It's nothing positive.
But it's also a testament to the GOP's refusal to change. They would rather just prevent you from voting in order to keep things the way they are. But we're not going to have that. So without further ado, we are going to welcome in the representative of the 100th district in the Lone Star State, Jasmine Crockett. Welcome to Generational Change.
Hi guys, how are y'all?
Hi, it's so nice to meet you. I was just watching you on the show 2 days ago, and I texted him like, "We got to get this girl. We got to get her on the show." And then I'm like, "Oh, she'll never respond." So then I called my friend Ina Minjares.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, I could probably get Ina to come on, but then I knew that you were sort of leading this thing. So, and then you responded. I was so excited. It's so nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too. I apologize. We literally are just leaving a dinner with a congresswoman, and so I'm on a bus.
No, it's all good.
But I make sure I keep my headphones ready and my phone ready so that I can do whatever interviews I need to do. So thanks so much for doing this, you guys. It's
absolutely.
Really powerful to have the type of platform that you have and to use it for good instead of bad. So I'm excited to join in on the
And people know I'm partial to Texas because I lived there for 6 years. My older son was born there. I was in San Antonio, is where I went to law school. Wow. I'm St. Mary's. So, and I have a lot of friends there because of that. So I always have like an eye on what's going on in Texas. But talk a little bit about what was going on where you're like, you know what, this is what we're going to have to do to take a stand.
You know, it was a little different for me though. Well, I think it was different for all the different members, but I'm a freshman. So this was a very abusive relationship that we had in the 87th legislature. And I was just like, this is bad. This is bad. Oh my God, this sucks. And so I finally got to the point that, on this last voting bill, it was kind of just the final straw. I think we all had been beaten down so much with the stupid bills. Everyone talks about like the voter suppression bill, but people don't understand that it was like the entire session was a suppression session, right? There were the attacks on trans kids. There were attacks on women's bodies. There were attacks as relates to doing anything smart with guns, even though we lead the country in mass shootings. There were attacks on the homeless community where they wanted to continually criminalize them from setting up tents so that they would have shelter to defecating and urinating in public. There were just nothing but it was nothing but an onslaught of attacks the entire session. And so we finally get to the very end and it's voting rights. And it's the one thing that no matter what part of the state you come from, we all agree that this is the very democracy that we all depend upon. And it was just one step too far. The initial bill, SB 7, that we walked out on in May, included provisions such as you can just overturn an election, right? And you're an attorney. So to make it clear, you didn't have to actually prove that any fraud changed the results of the election. Let's say there was one person who did something wrong. That's enough to raise the issue and try to overturn the election, even though it wasn't a one vote election. And then what they wanted to do is they wanted to do a bit of forum shopping. So let's say it was an election in Dallas County, but I don't want to try this case in Dallas County. I want to go somewhere else where it's not so blue. They also wanted to lower the standard of proof. And so they wanted to say, hey, instead of it being clear and convincing evidence, we just want to use the preponderance standard. I mean, so everything that they could, but you had to understand that the author of the House bill as well as the author of the Senate bill, they are both licensed attorneys who decided that they would use their time in going to try to overturn the election results in other states, such as Pennsylvania. So I'm guessing the impediments that they found in Pennsylvania, they decided you know what, just in case we run into this situation ever in the state of Texas, we need to make this easier to do. As we know, that provision did not survive in the current versions that we have. In addition to Souls to the Polls attacks, that provision did not survive in the current version that we have. So most people say, hey, they took out the bad stuff. Nope, we still got 44 pages left to go, right? So to be clear, Texas is already the hardest state to vote in. And I keep telling people, we just want nice things like everybody else in the state of Texas. There are 36 states plus DC that allow people to register to vote online. The state of Texas refuses to even have a hearing on an online voter registration bill.
Wow.
So when you talk about accessibility, when you talk about being reasonable, you guys have to understand that the laws that are already on the book in the state of Texas are already completely suppressive and regressive in the first place. That's one reason we have the lowest voter turnout in the country. That is not because Texans don't believe in voting. It's because Texans believe in suppressing the vote, or at least their elected officials believe in it. So, seems like you may have a question, because I feel like I've been talking.
No, it's good. Look, I'm familiar with Texas. And because that's where I went to law school, a lot of what I learned was Texas. And I remember there in the beginning of talking about the Texas Constitution that people were like, oh, don't even bother with that thing. That thing is like, nobody understands. Like, it's like this. It's ridiculous. Texas has a lot of weird things that people don't realize. So talk about when this strategy started coming together, like who thought of this? Like, how did that come about that you're like, you know what? The only way we're going to have power is to step out.
Yeah, no. Okay. So the first bill that we killed, there were only 2 hours left on the clock. It had been brewing for some time. I was kind of that rowdy freshman that was like, why are we sitting here? As they're passing permitless carry, as they're restricting abortion and infringing upon women's bodies, as they are getting rid of local control as it relates to cities and their budgets. Like there was so much. And I was like, why are we sitting here? And so a senior member told me about quorum and told me, this is what it takes and whatnot. And so I was like, I don't understand why we're not breaking this. Like, so for me, let me get you some light.
It's all good. We're a podcast, so
a
lot of people are audio anyway, but that's fine.
Okay, I guess I can't get the light. So anyway, so that was kind of brewing for me over some time. I was quite frustrated. At different points in time, there were different members that were trying to have different conversations about different bills, where they were like, we should just, walk out on this bill. So we really got to about the Saturday before that Monday or Sunday. We got to that Saturday, and a number of us were like, yo, like, how many people are really down with like walking, right? And it was hard to kind of get a count. Like, can we get a count on this? And then there were just concerns about, well, if we walk, and they bring us back, will they make it worse? They probably will make it worse. If we walk, well, what will happen to my bills that maybe have made it to the governor's desk? Like, will he kill my bills? Like, there were just so many considerations that were going on, but we never could really get our hands on a count. And so finally on Sunday, the time is like ticking, like the clock is just going and going, and this bill is about to be ready. The bill had to lay out for 24 hours. So it was coming up on the calendar, and we started to have, a number of more meetings. There had been kind of like these silos of meetings. The core group that I was a part of was kind of part of pushing the Black and Brown coalition to actually pull together. And it was the most epic thing. So we had these calls on Saturday. Gina Hinojosa had went ahead and found a Black church for us to go to if we did decide that we were going to walk on Sunday. We just wanted to have provisions in place. We were trying to figure out how much time was going to be on the clock. Would we have to really try to get outside the city limits? Like, there was just a lot of things like that we were kind of planning for, as backups. And so ultimately, it was probably about, my times are all off, so I'm not even gonna give you times anymore. But at some point in time, there's this black and brown meeting that's called, and the speaker knows that we're having a hard time with this bill. And the speaker says, okay, you guys need to have a meeting. I'll just go ahead and put the house at ease at a certain time. And so we were all told, hey, when the house goes at ease, all black and brown people leave the floor. And we all, like, in mass, we left the floor. And like the Republicans were looking like, what's going on? Like, what are they doing? Are they coming back? Like, they didn't know like what was going on. And we had a conversation, and we were like, listen, if we're going to do this, we've got to know that we've got the numbers. It doesn't work if like 5 people leave. Like it takes like all of us kind of working together. And so in that meeting, it became clear that, you know, the energy was kind of going in that direction. And so the whips were released so that they could go ahead and determine, hey, how many people are really in? And by the time we had another meeting with the speaker about this bill and how offensive it was and our concerns, we knew that we had the numbers. And so, you know, there were those that are so good at, you know, procedure, and they really wanted to procedurally do everything that they could to kill this bill. But with this being the governor's priority, I'm not even going to say a governor priority, but like the governor priority, I was thinking, there's no way they're going to let us kill it. And so they had already gotten 25 signatures, which is what is required under the rules to make sure that you could actually stop debate on, like you could call the question on any type of conversation, debate that's going on the bill. So they went and got that done first thing in the morning. And so we knew that they were going to call the question. And if they called the question and we were still there on the floor doing procedural things, we were screwed. Like it was going to pass. They would have quorum. And it became evident that, you know, nothing on the floor was going to work. And so then after we had slowly been leaving, the rest of the members went ahead and they got out, and therefore breaking quorum. And so it was great. It was like really a short-lived victory, seemingly, because then the governor is like, y'all ran away. I'm gonna take y'all pay. Like, what? You know, like that was what he was on. And everybody's like, yeah, you know, quitters don't get paid. And I'm like, first of all, we walked out one day. Second of all, we already got that check. Like, stop it. And so, you know, he actually vetoed the legislative branch. Now, our money is guaranteed through the Constitution, but the branch itself, like, that allows us to actually function and be like an actual branch of government, like the clerks, the parliamentarians, anyone that works on the committees, like those that actually draft the bills, like, he got rid of them and our staffers and all the Republicans and all of the Senate. Like, he didn't like do something where it's like, oh, this is for Democrats only. Like, that's not how it works, right? So he got rid of all of them. And so there's no funding until September. Well, the funding ends on September 1. So he says, I'm calling them back into special session. So he calls us back into special session. But now we know that he's mad, right? Like, he's big mad. So if we're going to do anything, we're going to need to be prepared. We won't have 2 hours left on the clock to kill. It's going to be like days, if not the entire month. And so we didn't know when we would be called back in. We didn't know what exactly would be on the call. We didn't know exactly what their strategy was going to be. So we knew that we needed to be very flexible, but we needed to know how many people were willing to make a sacrifice of up to 30 days to be away from their family. And we had the numbers. We had enough people that were willing to make the sacrifice if it came down to it. So
how many people walked out, Jasmine?
We have everybody except for 4, so 63.
That's awesome. And you only needed how many?
51.
That's awesome. That's like the coolest. This is what we're talking about, people. This is
they say that Texas has the biggest balls in the country. I guess that goes for both political parties.
Everything's bigger in Texas.
Everything.
Well, don't mess with Texas. You know, I'm curious. Again, this is a very hot button issue. There are, arguments on both sides as to what type of voting rights or even restrictions for that matter. It shouldn't be restrictions, but nevertheless, a lot of people seem to think there should be. What would you say are the primary components of this bill that is basically a non-starter as far as you're concerned, and it's a complete what you would call, Texas GOP special, if you will?
Oh, that have to be the voter intimidation portion of this bill. That really is the part that I really don't think is really being communicated very well. This bill wants to embolden and empower partisan poll watchers. A lot of those guys that most likely showed up to the insurrection.
So in essence, kind of like with the MAGA brigade that tried to run the bus off the road.
Yep.
So essentially, what this bill will allow is for, if you're a supporter of the GOP, and we know as of right now, the GOP has a pretty big stronghold in the state. So if they were to vote somewhere, in the Austin metro area, Dallas, Houston, wherever, you could show up more or less in your complete MAGA brigade and stand right by the polling doors, almost as if to basically say, just remember, we're going to be watching you when you go in there to vote, and we're going to know if you're on our side or not.
It's worse than that. It's worse than that.
Please share.
So what the bill allows for is I send poll watchers. Most candidates send poll watchers to make sure that things in a polling location are functioning like they're supposed to. The simple things, like, for instance, the one rule that everybody knows: if you're in line by the time that the polls close, then you're good to go, right? Like, making sure that people aren't disenfranchised because they're turned away and it's like, oh, you didn't make it inside the building even though you were in line. They make sure that, because that's something you can't fix later, right? Like, you can't fix that after somebody's left because someone sent them away, giving them the wrong information. So we always send poll watchers. Our poll watchers for my campaign normally will call us or call down to the elections administrator if there's a concern or question about any irregularities, maybe take notes of any irregularities so that they can be resolved in real time. Well, most of the time the candidates train their poll watchers, but usually the poll watchers kind of just, they're just observers. It's like an election observer. What we did in Texas is they passed permitless carry. So number one, people will be allowed to have guns. Okay. So add that.
Sounds about right. Sounds about right for Texas.
Add that to fact that you've got these partisan poll watchers who are mainly going to go into, by their own admission, because we have this recording of this group that is outside of Harris County that wanted to go down into the city, the urban area, and make sure that they can watch what they're doing. There's no parameters on how closely a partisan poll watcher can get to an actual voter. There's language in there that says that they have to be able to hear what's going on. So we're threatening, number one, the secrecy of the ballot. Number two, the intimidation factor that is built into this. Like, this is completely done for the purpose of intimidating. There is no, and on top of that, the person that normally runs the polling location is the election judge, which is usually some little sweet little old man or old woman that has been doing this forever, right? They're basically stripping them of any power to control their polling location. The partisan poll watcher has more power than they do. Normally, an election judge would be able to have someone removed if there's some issues. They're not allowed to do that under this. And election judges are trained in the election law before they're allowed to even serve. These partisan poll watchers do not have to go through any training whatsoever. So you could essentially have this debate and ongoing kind of fight with the partisan poll watcher and the election judge. The previous version of this bill also allowed them to be able to do recordings. We're not even allowed to have our own phone out and take a picture of our own ballot, right? But they were going to allow these guys to do recordings, which yet again could be intimidating to a voter and definitely turn them off and turn them away from the ballot box. And I absolutely believe that that's the intent, because partisan poll watchers, they're not the police. Like, I don't understand, like why are we doing all of this? So that's one piece that I don't really feel like people understand is part of this bill. Another thing for me that is quite offensive, as a civil rights lawyer, as a criminal defense attorney, is this idea of just over criminalization. They call things voter fraud. Most of the time they're voter mistakes, right? And I don't know if they're even really mistakes so much as it is a lack of education of what the law is, right? Most of the time when we think about someone committing something criminal, we think of them as having some nefarious intent of some sort. That's not required in the majority of these provisions in this bill. And one of the crazy things is they were so upset with Harris County because Harris County basically had a bunch of millennial elected officials that decided
excuse me, just for people who don't know, Harris County is Houston. Or yes, Houston is in Harris County. I'm just giving, because Texas is big, I'm giving a frame of reference. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
So basically, if an elected official sends out a vote by mail application to someone who qualifies to vote by mail, if they do that under this bill, that elected official has now committed a crime and they are to go to jail. Why would that be criminal?
I don't understand.
To send out a vote by mail application.
How else are they supposed to just come in themselves and get it?
They have to figure it out on their own. You cannot assist anybody in getting a vote by mail application.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So you can see that it's all about the restrictions. And so, even they're saying, oh, we expanded access to the ballot box. Go ahead, Carl. We expanded access to the ballot box because we're providing for more hours than historically have been provided for in this bill. Well, most states do a minimum standard when it comes to the number of hours that polling locations must be open. But what I liken it to, there's never been a maximum. Now they want a maximum number of hours. So with them requiring a maximum number of hours, they're actually suppressing the vote again. So I was like the party chair, Democratic Party chair in Texarkana, which is East Texas, small town. I never, ever would have wanted 24-hour voting in East Texas. There just wouldn't have been the demand for it. We're just kind of a smaller area, but it's the same thing that like we didn't have that many restaurants that stayed open 24 hours a day in Texarkana either. But if you go to Houston, right, you'll have a number of restaurants that stay open 24 hours because the demand is there. And so this idea of taking away local control has been that was also another theme this session, was the locals are not smart enough to handle their own counties. Historically, Republicans have always said that they are the party of small government.
Yeah.
And local control matters. And so what I've decided is the locals can control it so long as the locals are Republicans. But as soon as the locals aren't Republicans, then we need Big Brother to come and talk to us. And so that's exactly what they did. Literally, we had a ton of bills that were bracketed to only affect our largest counties, which happen to be democratically controlled. They're trying to tie their hands. And they're also trying to do everything that they can to make sure that they hopefully lose in their next elections. When we talk about our attorney general, who wants to go out and prosecute everybody, and the most that he was able to even bring cases on in a number of years, the testimony was that there were 44 cases, and the majority of those 44 cases were actually mistakes. They weren't real cases of voter fraud. But I can tell you what was real and what is real: the 700 people that died this year in our winter storm because we don't have a functioning grid. I can tell you about the tens of thousands of people that died from COVID-19 because we had a lack of leadership coming out of the governor's mansion. So to me,
your lieutenant governor should be charged as an accessory to murder, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, all of them should be. But our attorney general, which is where I started this, our attorney general actually went as far as saying on TV, which I'm like, I can't wait for the litigation over whatever voting nonsense we get. He goes, yeah, I had to stop them from sending out those vote by mail applications because if I hadn't, Trump would have lost the election.
Oh, man.
That's what he said. So we know what the demographics in the state of Texas are. We know that in the last 10 years, the growth has been Black, brown, and Asian. 80% of it has been that. Our demographics in the state of Texas really almost mirror the demographics in the state of California. We are crazy diverse.
Yeah.
The problem is we don't have access to the ballot box. We don't have access for the everyday person or the poor person, or, you know, we want to make all of these complications. So I know that the naysayers are like, voter ID, it should be the law everywhere, blah, blah, blah. You know, and I tell them we have voter ID in the state of Texas. So like, stop it. And we got in trouble for it as well, right? Texas passed strict voter ID, and we needed a court that would say Texas, that was intentionally discriminatory yet again, because that's what y'all like to do. And so there had to be some sort of safety valve. So people have the ability to fill out an affidavit explaining why they don't have an ID and still be afforded an opportunity to vote. So now in this new bill, when it comes to vote by mail, they want to make you do voter ID as well. And let me tell you, I don't understand all the ballot by mail provisions in here. I can guarantee you nobody really understands all the ballot by mail provisions in here.
They don't want you to understand.
No. It was completely intentional, because we've had, I don't know how many briefings, right? And I'm talking about, we've got the elections administrators coming in, and like, these are the people that do this. Like, there's a letter from all these like small town Republican areas, and like the elections administrators are like, yeah, no, so this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. And then they're like, we don't even know what this means. Like, this is what's coming out from the like elected officials that will have to follow this. And so there's this, I'll make it as plain as I can. The bill would require a ton of your personal information to be on the outside of the ballot, to the extent that elderly persons would be subjected to identity theft, which is a real thing. I can tell you that that's a real thing. As a criminal defense attorney, I can tell you that's a real thing.
Yeah.
Because they want like now your social security number. It's like you got to put some. It's weird. And then something about where you sign. It's got to be where they were like, we don't even know how they're going to put this info. They literally were like, we don't know how we would open this ballot to confirm the information that we need to confirm without potentially, getting rid of the secrecy that is supposed to be provided for in the ballot. So it's a lot of drama. I don't know they don't know what they did. I'm sure the Heritage people did it for them.
That sounds right.
The Heritage Foundation, definitely. If you think they're big in Texas, they've got a very nice building in DC.
Oh, gosh.
Jasmine, one thing that I do want to cover, which I think is very important, is obviously there's a huge gubernatorial election coming up next year. I'd like to know from your perspective, the Texas Democrats are definitely trying to set precedent for the rest of the country, at least in the states that are either red or swing. And so in the case of yours, I mean, obviously there's a lot of rumblings about Beto running for governor, but I do think it's important to really talk about the importance of not just one election, but what the future can represent. We recently had Julie Oliver and Mike Siegel from Ground Game Texas on, and they really talked about the importance of building that foundation in Texas, because it definitely can be done. There's a lot of voters to be had. Like you said, a lot of the reason why the GOP has been dominant for so long are these voter suppressive methods. So I'm curious, in terms of the leadership and the goals of the Texas Democrats, what do you guys foresee as being more or less the short and the long-term strategy? And is there, much like the way that the non-corporate progressives took over Nevada's Democratic Party, are there a lot of things that people can learn from the Texas Democrats that they can incorporate within their state party?
Yeah, okay. So short goal, obviously, right now is federal oversight. That's the easy one, right? Because Texas always has to be told you're bad. That's obviously the short goal. The long goal to me, though, has to be one that says we'll do whatever we've got to do to get over this. And so I'm glad that you brought up Mike and Julie. They are absolutely amazing. I am completely on board. I actually sit on their advisory board.
Did not know that.
We didn't even know that.
I thought that was a little plug. Yeah, no. So I am. I'm actually myself and James Tallarico, right? Go figure. So we are, sadly enough, we're doing this over here right now. But when we get back, I'm a grassroots girl. I won my election by 90 votes. I was
Wow.
the girl that was outspent 5-1. I was out endorsed. When I say out endorsed, I didn't really have any endorsements. So I mean, and I'm talking about Congress people, everybody came out to support my opponent. But I would never be outworked. And I did what no one thought could be done. And then I ended up being the only newly elected Black freshman this year. And where most people probably thought this probably isn't the best space for you. You probably don't have like room to grow and spread your wings. I have been very aggressive. I didn't like the fact that.
I hate that, by the way, when people that's that sort of you needed to wait your turn mentality.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it is something that it drives me insane. That's called a monarchy, not a democracy. So, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying that I believe in the power of the people. I'm a testament of the power of the people. And so, if I can avoid an opponent, which I probably won't just because people love to just run for office, that's fine. It's a democracy. I think they're hard pressed to beat me, but whatever, bring it on. But if I could avoid an opponent, my only goal would be in getting around this state, getting into places like Texarkana, where I was the chair of the Democratic Party. Like, I can talk the lingo in East Texas, Longview, Tyler, Texarkana, Marshall.
That's a whole other world for people watching this. That's like when people think of Texas or they think of Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, and Austin. I'm like, no. When you get outside of the perimeter of that, it's a whole different thing. And Texas could be like 5 states.
Oh,
and
yeah,
so
no.
East Texas is like East Texas to me might as well be Louisiana.
Oh yeah, no, it's crazy. But I want to get out. I want to, I think one of the things that we've done, if we don't do anything else with us breaking quorum, is we've number one brought attention to the fact that the GOP will stop at nothing. And so for those that believe that their votes don't count, well, why would they be doing all of this? Why would you go this far?
Exactly.
You wouldn't go this far if people's votes didn't count. So I think that, we get to take control of the rhetoric, number one, and say, hey, your votes do count. Number two, don't you want to show them up and show them that they really should have just been nice people and let us have nice things? Don't you want to just go ahead and get rid of them? Our numbers are tight. Years ago, people kept saying we're going to flip Texas. And I'm like, yo, we ain't flipping nothing, right? Now I'm like one of those, we're going to flip Texas, right? And I believe that the Republicans believe that because they wouldn't be fighting so hard. This would not be a reason to call a special session, right? The governor is not going to give up until he gets some more suppression on the books because he doesn't know how else he can win. It is a scary fact that their most popular guy, right, Donald Trump, he only won the big red state of Texas by about a little bit over 5 points. That is scary when you go back and you say, if we just go back 2 presidential cycles, there were double-digit leads for the Republicans.
But I totally won Texas twice. I totally won it twice. I won it twice. Big time, really great, really incredible. And you're just a little freshman representative. You're totally not on my level yet. Wait your turn.
Okay, so at the risk of me feeling exceptionally old, what year did you graduate law school?
2006.
Okay, that's not that old. Okay, I was 2000, so it's not that bad. I mean, like oftentimes it'll be like a 20-year difference, and I'm like, yeah, that's not good. Because a friend of mine from St. Mary's actually transferred over to Houston. Yeah, but long before you, it was still long before you were there.
Yeah.
Well, so obviously, this has been a wonderful conversation, but we would probably be remiss to not ask you what the experience has been like going to DC.
How long do you have to stay out? That's the other thing. Like, how long are you committed to being there?
So our 30 days will end on August the 7th. On August the 7th, we would have effectively killed both of these bills. The governor can call another special session. and he has to start all the way over. They've got
And
to
what
start
happens
over.
when you go back?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to jail though.
No,
I'm not
I
going to
think
jail.
all that they could really do is force you to stay in chambers until it gets done. Like, I think that's the scope of the authority. I don't think that there's anything criminal. I think it's more like a civil contempt thing than it is. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
You're not wrong.
Okay.
You're not wrong. But you know, when you have a governor that wants to just lie to people, I'm like, y'all should just vote him out for being a liar. But
Again,
clearly,
and I say this every time he comes up. I voted against him when he ran for attorney general. I would have never imagined that he would be. He's disgusting, and I've never liked him. So
listen, I mean, you wouldn't think that this guy was a lawyer, let alone a former Supreme Court justice.
Oh, yes.
Let alone an attorney general, and then says stupid stuff like, "I'm gonna lock him up." First of all, you ain't got no authority, none at all. Like, we could start there. You're not the one. The Speaker of the House is the one that would, put the call on the House, which the call has been put on the House. And our sweet little sergeants. I mean, you guys can go watch a video. That's the other thing. I'm like, I really wish I had the time or energy or desire to post on his Twitter and be like, so this is what you meant? Because they they read a piece of paper. They're like, is your member here? Okay. Well, by the authority that I have, blah, 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 blah. Please let your member know that we want them back. It was like this formality or whatever. And I'm like, guys, you guys know where we are. Like, we haven't been shy about it. We're in DC and y'all can't do nothing about it. And these headlines back home, they're like, oh, the fugitive legislators. I'm like, I'm not a fugitive. Like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just overkill, right? Like, he's so dramatic. And, I'm just like, so you thought it worked for Trump, so you think that it's going to work for you? Okay. Like, whatever. No. Just lie to the people. So he's actually, I think, been called out a couple of times. I'm like, that's got to feel really bad to have, like, the little black girl freshman be like who Fox News is asking you about when she's made like a comment. So I've said
that's got to be harsh for him, man. That's got to be bad.
That's got to be bad. Like,
that's gonna leave a mark.
Yeah, because I'm like on CNN. They're like, "Are you going to jail?" I'm like, "No," and they're like, "Oh, okay." Like, no, I'm not. Sorry, didn't commit a crime. It's kind of unconstitutional. So if you lock me up, you're gonna have a whole other issue on your hands.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.